Welcome back to the Blister and Muck podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Mason. This week, we rejoin Blister, passing by those dice-rolling bilge rats while on his way to save a bear from forced captivity. To his keen ears, it sounded as if those good for-nothings had ensnared an unsuspecting victim. Before we dive in and see if Blister rescues this naive nincompoop, I have some serious questions to ask you, the listeners. And no, this isn't another setup for a cheesy joke. However, if you were wondering where a rat goes to replace his tail, the answer is a retail store. The questions I have been pondering have to do with kindness, cooperation, and altruism. If altruism is not a word you know, it means making a personal sacrifice in order to help someone else. To help someone else gain, you deliberately suffer a loss. Here's what I'm curious about. Is kindness real, or is it something we only do to make ourselves feel good? Can we be authentically altruistic, or is that just a strategy we use? Like, if I help you now, then you'll have to help me down the road. Researchers think humans evolved to cooperate millions of years ago as a way to outsmart predators. By teaming up, we could avoid becoming solitary, saber-toothed tiger snacks. And we're not the only creatures who use these social survival strategies. In the late 1980s, a researcher out in the winter woods observed some ravens swarming around a moose carcass. Rather than keep the meal a private secret, they called out to attract other ravens. How generous, right? Turns out these were young ravens pillaging food from a tougher, older raven's territory. They called in other ravens as reinforcements. Sharing the meal was a small price to pay for avoiding any fisticuffs, or feather-to-cuffs, or fist-to-wings, whatever. The point is, what seemed like kindness was just a strategy. And around the world, there are multiple instances of one kind of animal adopting some other kind of baby animal. For example, a leopard adopted a baby baboon. A lioness adopted a baby oryx, despite the fact that lions love oryx in their lunchboxes. In Ireland, a farm cat adopted some ducklings, and in Canada, a Great Dane adopted a fawn. You can Google each of these accounts and find the actual heart-melting videos. But is it really heart-melting if the adoptive mother came to each baby's rescue not because of compassion, but because of powerful hormones, which are just chemicals in the body that, among other things, can cause your armpits to stink? What about the young animals who suffer abuse during captivity and wind up forming powerful friendship bonds with other creatures? For instance, Jag the jaguar now lives in a wildlife park in South Africa. He cannot go a day without Bullet, the Jack Russell Terrier who became his buddy when he was freed from captivity. And then there's the famous BLT. That's Baloo the bear, Leo the lion, and Shere Khan the tiger, who lived together in Georgia. All three were rescued from terrible situations and are now inseparable, and have their own Facebook page. Researchers have found that many of these traumatized animals form these deep bonds as a way to ease their stress and emotional turmoil. So, kindness, altruism, cooperation, friendship, these are all just stratagems? Nothing more? Well, then how do you explain what happened in 2013? Off the coast of Portugal, people saw a dolphin struggling to swim. It had a misshapen spine. It was essentially handicapped, and it was all alone. That is, until a pod of sperm whales adopted it. They helped it graze for food. And when it cuddled against them to show affection, the whales cuddled back. Mothering instincts and hormones do not explain why this pod might help an adult dolphin with a crooked spine. What's the strategy? What payoff could they possibly anticipate? I suppose we just don't know enough about marine mammals to accurately answer these questions. But do we really know enough about our own species to accurately answer these questions? Do we really know our own selves well enough? What if a creature deployed the friendship stratagem in order to cure his loneliness? In other words, he pitches in and helps another creature so that he won't be alone anymore. Is that better or worse than a bunch of noisy ravens defending their bloody moose bones? Episode 5. Dicey Decisions. Against his better judgment, Blister sidled up to the clustered bilge rats and found Muck rolling dice. Blister nudged the rat nearest him and whispered, "What's afoot here?"
"We convinced this gilded hayseed to play skulls and bones."
"But why? A hayseed can't pay up after losing."
"That's where you're wrong. A proper silver whisker, this one is. If he don't want us to pound him into a flat pelt, he'll take us to his country mansion and fill our bellies from that great big pantry."
Blister smacked his head.
"A pantry? Why didn't I think of that?"
He shot off looking for one of the newsboys. He found one busily handing out papers in exchange for coins. Without arousing notice, Blister pulled a stack of papers under a carriage parked along the curb. Swiftly, he flipped to page 4. Back at the dice rolling, Muck shook his cup of dice hard enough to make foam. If he rolled all bones, these rats promised to give him a cozy place to live with regular access to delicious food that did not come from a rubbish bin. Clicka, 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 clicka. A thrilling surge of destiny tingled up from his feet. This roll was the one. He upended the cup, but a paw darted out and caught the little cubes before they could clatter out. "Hey!" Muck and the pack of bilge rats shouted.
"How could you?"
Blister cut in.
"You promised me you would never gamble again, but here you are. Hopeless. That's what you are. Hopeless."
He stomped in a dramatic circle to break up the tight cluster of rats. He clutched the dice in one paw while carrying behind his back a rolled bundle of paper slips he'd torn from the newspapers. Muck gaped. "I never promised."
"I'll straighten you out later. Right now, we have to hurry or we'll be late. I'll just return these pellets of vice."
Blister examined the dice and saw what he'd suspected all along.
"Now isn't that strange?" he said. "Every side has a skull, not a single bone."
"Good gracious, I've been cheated." Muck knotted his tail around his paws. Overhead, a hovering gull laughed.
"Ha! Yeah. Let that be a lesson to you."
Blister used the rolled papers to tap Muck's nose. Then he tossed the dice into the sea.
"Wait just a minute."
A rat the size of a lapdog blocked their path.
"He owes us, him does. He lost 8 rolls in a row."
"He owes you nothing. The dice were rigged,"
Blister scoffed, with more confidence than he felt.
"Them's dice was mine, and cheat or no, you throwed 'em away. Now you owes me."
The giant rat cracked his knuckles as he drew his meaty paws into fists.
"That's right, Bile. Pound him. Pulverize him. Teach him to eat knuckle sandwiches."
The pack of bilge rats goaded. Blister edged away from the rat named Bile.
"Were those your dice? Oh, sorry. I wish I could repay you, but I'm afraid I have nothing."
Bile yanked Blister up by the neck scruff. The other bilge rats restrained Muck, who fought back with indignant refrains of, "Now see here! Now see here!"
"You gots to have something,"
Bile snarled spittle on Blister's whiskers.
"I have nothing. Please, just let us go,"
Blister pleaded.
"What's that you is keeping behind your back?"
Blister looped his tail around the papers, and then held out both paws.
"Nothing. I'm holding nothing."
Bile plucked the papers away. He dropped Blister into the clutches of the rat pack below. Blister wiggled and kicked.
"Give those back. You can't have 'em."
"What is it? What's them papers for?"
Many rats clamored and pawed at the papers. Bile stared at them so long, Blister supposed he could not read.
"Them's papers is invitations."
He displayed one so the other rats could see. Under the fancy swirling city crest came the following proclamation in printed letters that resembled wrought iron fence posts. Please to admit the bearer and guest to view the annual ceremony of the washing of the lions at the mayoral mansion with a banquet to follow. Enter at the south gate.
"I never heard of no lion washing ceremony,"
commented one of the bilge rats.
"I should think not,"
Blister scoffed.
"It is a premier event reserved for the most upper crust creatures. Isn't that right, old boy?"
Blister nudged Muck and then assumed a superior pose by lifting his nose into the air. Muck was addled and terrified, but he managed to nod and poke his own snout skyward.
"With a banquet to follow?"
Bile scratched his head.
"What's this banquet?"
"Ain't that what you sleep under?"
one rat offered.
"That's a blanket, stupid,"
Bile snarled.
"A banquet is a huge feast of free food," Blister explained. "If you don't mind, I need those invitations back. They are intended for some very important rats."
"More important than us?"
Bile bent down and leered at Blister, with teeth as big and sharp as meat cleavers. Blister audibly gulped.
No, of course not. Would you do me the honor of accepting those invitations?"
"Thought you'd never ask us. Come on, lads. Us is going to the mayor's mansion."
Bile and the bilge rats abandoned Blister and Muck. "Once more I am indebted to you," Muck said as he rubbed the bruises from his arms. "If you hadn't come along with those invitations, I would have been a pulverized pawn, a ruined rodent." The only thing that kept Blister from checking Muck's effusive dribblings was the vision he had of the two of them riding a train out to the country to Muck's fine manor house. He pictured the Furbanks giving him a hero's welcome, then ushering him into a well-stocked pantry 4 times the size of Madam Putreska's underground caverns.
"Think nothing of it," Blister said. "Just promise me you won't ever play dice unless you bring your own cubes."
"Cross my heart," Muck said, using the tip of his tail like a quill to cross his whole chest. "I don't suppose you can obtain more of those invitations. When it comes to my civic education, I hate to seem like a careless cad or a lost lout, but I too have never heard of the annual lion washing ceremony."
"You mean you want to go see the lions get washed?"
"Quite. Oh, yes, indeed." Muck twisted his paws and tail into an eager knot. Imagining towers of cheese wheels, stacks of salt-glittered crackers, and mountains of fresh-baked bread loaves inside the Furbanks family food stores, Blister cupped his arm around Muck's butter-blonde shoulders.
"Muck, McAllister, old pal, today is April 1st, April Fool's Day. That means those invitations were nothing but a jesterly joke, a hilarious hoax, a silly scam. The mayor does not really have any lions, dirty or otherwise. You get my meaning?"
"Indeed I do," Muck nodded gravely. "Those poor bilge rats, they are going to be so vastly vexed."
"Which is why we won't be here when they get back."
Blister lured Muck from the harbor. "You mean you deliberately deluded them?"
"Of course. Had to get my buddy out of a fix, didn't I?"
Blister ruffed the fur on Muck's head.
"Speaking of which, since I single-handedly managed to save your life, again, I thought maybe you would like to repay me with a little favor."
Muck clapped his paws. "I would do anything. Simply proffer the project."
"You mean I could name any task and you'd do it?"
"With excessive effort, yes."
"Excellent. It's a little job, it's another rescue mission."
Blister led his companion to the rooftops and in the direction of the market district. "Another rescue? Why, Blister, you are the most charitable champion I have ever met. Of course I'll second your scheme. But first, would it be possible to dive in a dumpster and collect comestibles?"
"You mean you're hungry? Never fear, my good Muck. The promise of a food payment awaits us at the end of this task."
"You would share your earnings with me? You're a gem of generosity." Blister shrugged.
"I feed you, you feed me. Share and share alike, I always say."
A magnanimous motto indeed. Hey, thanks for listening. I launched this project as a way to ease the massive stress that so many people are experiencing right now. To be sure, it's not the cure for everything that ails us during this global pandemic. My sincere hope is that it is an effective, comforting treatment. Twice in my lifespan, I have lost everything. I know what it's like to have overwhelming forces sweep away beloved people, comfortable routines, and a cozy home, as if they were nothing more than mounds of beach sand. It's so easy in those moments to list the things that are going wrong, or that are awful. And it's a major victory even if one thing, one tiny joy, one tender mercy makes the opposite list of things going well. If this show brought you one tiny joy, if it brought you one small moment in a safe harbor, buffered from storms raging elsewhere, then I hope you'll share it with your friends, neighbors, and anyone else who could use a little comfort. I am deeply grateful to the donors who have supported the show in these early weeks. Your contributions ensure that the Blister and Muck Storytime podcast reaches more ears, more earbuds, more families hungry for a fun mystery and a dose of fun storytelling. Tune in again next week as Blister and Muck venture deep into Oddvine Park. It's a long story, but they'll try to rescue a bear, and you can expect a busted coffin, a calliope, and a ghost. I've been receiving wonderful letters from listeners over at blisterandmuck.com. Next week, I'll share a bit of what listeners from across the United States have to say about this show. If you want to get in touch, just use the contact form on our website. Special thanks to composer Roland Rudzitis for serving up the Blister and Muck theme song. Additional music from John Bartman and Mon Plaisir. I am forever grateful for my family, friends, and fans. One for one, and all for you.